The St. Louis Blues drop Game 5 in a frustrating evening north of the border and will now head back to St. Louis, where they will face elimination on Friday night in Game 6. This is the Blues Hub Postgame Show, and I'm your host, Ethan Hannaford. I am joined tonight by an absolute all-star squad that is including Thomas Welch, Mike Meyer, and Jacob Stanoch. We want to hear your thoughts on tonight's game. As you guys already are, we appreciate the interaction, and we're going to get through all of the processing, all of the venting. What did you guys like? What made you sick to your stomach? What adjustments, I should say, are the Blues going to need to make on Friday night to even up the series? We'll begin breaking it all down in just a moment. But first, a quick reminder that the Blues Hub Postgame Show is sponsored by Hot Shots here on Sports Hub STL and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gentlemen, I appreciate you joining me tonight and staying up for a late one. Thankfully, the Blues are not going to have the late night game on Friday night, but I appreciate you all staying up late to discuss a frustrating one, it seems, I think is the best way, or is the best word that I can come up with for, I guess, what this Blues game consisted of tonight. But Mike, I'll go ahead and start with you. When you look at immediate takeaways from the Blues loss tonight against Winnipeg, what are you immediately going to?
I think the first thing here that I'm going to is just a lack of just playing a full 60. I mean, this is a team who looked at that. They took almost the second period off. You know, as much as you're going to be able to say that here in a playoff game, they just did not play their game. They just could not get any momentum going. Plain and simple. I just don't think, you know, getting any pucks deep here in the second period, it just did not go their way. And they were getting frustrated, and I think in their own heads, and a chance to be able to be in, you know, at Winnipeg, to be able to just take a commanding 3-2 series lead, to be able to head back here to St. Louis. And I just think, you hate to use the word choke, but it kind of looked like a choke scenario.
Jacob, let me hear your thoughts. Immediate thoughts.
Immediate thoughts. I think it was a closer game than a lot of people think it was. But on the other side of that, it was Blues had breaks. Blues didn't get breaks. They got little to no puck luck. And I don't think they played off of it well. I think we saw the Blues got kind of the home ice bounces. They got a little bit of extra puck luck at home. And not only did they play off it, they excelled off it. They didn't seem to get any of that. Didn't get a lot of calls going their way. Started off, obviously, with that tough call against Sonny with the embellishment. Just going to say that now. Put it out there in the world. Embellishment. And just after that, it just seems like the slow kind of motivation slowly pulling away from it. And they just couldn't play off of that at all. They had a lot of issues with trying to move forward. And I've seen it a lot with a lot of hockey teams. If you start off early with stuff usually not going their way or not getting a couple bounces, typically that can result in what we saw in the second period, which I don't think there's really any excuse to how the Blues played in that second period. That was just a rough period, too many turnovers, couldn't break it in whatsoever. Kind of just gifting away, not setting up anything inside of the offensive zone. It was a good pushback in the third, which was expected, but again, it was a very similar to the first two games where, and I think another thing too is that Jets were doing a great job, and I will say this about the Jets: they did a great job blocking shots tonight, and I think that's why I saw a handful of chats comments in the chat about the too much passing, and typically it's when you get tentative. You know, Jets did a great job blocking shots early on in the game. And I think they got tenders because when you get a team blocking shots, then typically you get a lot more careful with, or wanting to be careful with your shots. And they went right back to trying to find perfect lanes, trying to avoid blocks as much as they can. And when you do that, you get self-conscious, start moving the puck too much, pretty much. And then you don't have any great chances, or at least certainly not in the masses. Which we saw a lot the past two games. So, I mean, there was goods, there was bads. I don't think anything went their way, and I don't think the Blues did a good job of making it go their way at all. They didn't help out their chances.
Thomas?
All right. Excuse me if I go off on a tangent here, but I'm also going to talk out of two sides of my mouth. So I need chat to stick with me because I see a lot of negativity and a lot of positivity. I feel like everybody's kind of, straddling the aisle right now because technically the Blues shouldn't even be here. At the same time, it felt like going into this game, the Blues had all the momentum in the series, right? You made it a best of 3, 2-2 series when Winnipeg had home ice, and you blew them out twice at home, right? That being said, the home team has won every game in this series so far. So for the Blues to come out in an away game and lose shouldn't really be that much of a surprise. I think the manner in which it happened is surprising to us, given the fact that they had all this momentum going in, blowing the Jets out at home twice in a row, and then coming into this game, and in my opinion, getting dog walked. I don't think there was anything positive about this performance. So, I think the Blues, outside of Jordan Binnington, I think the Blues struggled in every facet of the game in which they've been successful. We saw Kyle Connor immediately with Mark Scheifele get on the score sheet. They linked up on the first goal before Mark Scheifele ended up leaving the game, which we'll talk about that later too. But physicality was there. I don't know. It didn't feel like they were as successful separating pucks from the Winnipeg Jets. Felt like the Jets were just still managing to weave their way through them. I don't know if that was the difference of, slotting Suter in there and losing Tucker, but it can't have made that much of a difference to where you're just getting hemmed in your own zone for an entire period. That second period was absolutely brutal. And like I said, riding off the momentum of 2 blowout games against the Winnipeg Jets, you would like to see a different performance from the St. Louis Blues when you know how crucial this game is. But all the things that we talked about throughout this series, the Blues were dominated in almost every period tonight in terms of offensive zone pressure. The Jets had them in the defensive zone the majority of the time. Jordan Binnington is doing everything that he can, stand on his head, keep this game close. The net front presence battle, I think, was nowhere near what we saw these last 2 games. Winnipeg Jets dominated that, which we know Jim Montgomery said has been a focal point for this team and for this series in the press conference last game, I believe. So, taking all of those things into consideration, I think the Blues got the result tonight that they deserved, which was a loss. So hopefully they can flush it, come out next game. You're back home. So statistically speaking, in the flow and the pattern of this series, we're expecting to win. And hopefully with the way that we won the last 2 games, it's a blowout win. And then going into a Game 7 scenario, if you guys remember, we're talking about the narrative between Jordan Binnington and Connor Hellebuck in the Four Nations. I believe Hellebuck won the first game in that, didn't he? And then they go to the championship game where backs against the wall, where everything matters, and, the most fierce environment in NHL and possibly all of sports, Jordan Binnington shows up and shows out to win Four Nations for Canada. So I'm still going to ride with Jordan Binnington as being that X factor in Game 7 that can potentially swing this series for the St. Louis Blues. So I don't think they're out of it. And that's me just speaking positive, and we'll get into performances too. There's a lot of guys that didn't show up in ways that they should, but I think Jordan Binnington is that X factor in a Game 7 in Winnipeg in a hostile environment that can still pull out a victory from the jaws of defeat, even if he has to, for the St. Louis Blues. So you go out, win Game 6. I still like our chances in Game 7, and that's why I don't think this series is over. But a disappointing result tonight nonetheless.
As Mike Claiborne said, I believe it was in the Game 2 post-game show, it's not really a series, right, until you win on the road, until you win on the road. And as of now, no team has done that. And while the momentum, it feels like after tonight's game, obviously has switched to the Jets side. This is a Blues team that has had their backs against the wall, even in this very playoff series. It was just a few days ago that St. Louis was coming back to St. Louis, trailing 2-0. And clearly we know how those 2 games went. So while the momentum is on Winnipeg's side right now, I think that there's still fair reason to, until proven wrong, right, to say that St. Louis is still very much so in this series. And I understand there's some frustration in the chat, but let's go ahead and let's try and walk back through this game and where things started to go wrong, it felt like the Blues, the one thing that the Blues had, Mike, going into tonight's game, right, that we mentioned was momentum. All the momentum seemed to be on their side. And even from the start, it felt like with the quick goal from Winnipeg, Kyle Connor, it felt like that goal set a tone early in the game that regardless of what was going to happen from Connor Hellebuck, the top line was going to show up. They did again tonight after being quiet in the previous 2 games. And they got the net front battle going early. And that was something that I felt like Winnipeg dominated all night. That first goal was a little bit of a weird one. Appleton goes down. The puck is under him for a second, and then all of a sudden he's up and he ends up with the assist after he kicks it to Scheifele. But the biggest takeaway, in my opinion, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, is Texier lets Kyle Connor get loose in the net front, regardless of what's going on behind the net. You let the best player on the ice shake free for just a second, and it was a second too long, and all of a sudden your backs are against the wall early in this one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's Kyle Connor is kind of turning into a little bit more of like an Alex Ovechkin at types where it's like, how does he get all alone here at this play? And then now all of a sudden, the play here, it looks like you said, it's a little awkward, a little broken here. Suter's caught behind the net. Letty here is caught standing around here a little bit. He has to really make a really tough play. You're going to be looking back at that single play and be able to say, wow, Letty made a fantastic stop if he could have somehow have made that play. Not really expecting Letty to be able to make that, but like you said, Texier is then left field to cover Kyle Connor. And that's almost an impossible coverage here for a guy here like Texier. So I can't necessarily say that I fault him, but like, hey, that's your guy. Like, you got to be able to cover this guy here. And unfortunately, he just leaves his assignment here for just a second, or he catches Connor just kind of just scooches away here just a little bit more, and he's just left wide open here again, just for an easy one-timer. And I think that early goal, it just invigorates the crowd here just a little bit more. It energizes them. They're up and going here. For anybody who says a home field advantage is not an advantage, well, they clearly have not been to Winnipeg to be able to see a playoff game there. So, yeah, this unfortunately was just a spot that they just didn't get the ball rolling here just right away. And unfortunately, it started really early in this game.
That it did, but St. Louis, as they have multiple times in this series, did respond, and they responded rather quickly. It was just about a little bit over 2 minutes into following that first goal where Colton Parayko created several opportunities for St. Louis. His shot ends up getting tipped in by who other than the Aussie, Nathan Walker, who knotted this one back up. I will give the Blues credit. Thomas, you said a moment ago that you didn't think that St. Louis did anything well in this game. I would slightly disagree, and my only disagreement, right, is I thought that they responded to the adversity pretty well in the first period. Them walking out of that first period, that was very unconventional in a lot of ways. When you look at some of the officiating calls, uncontrollables, right? But some of the hits, right, that end up getting called, some of them also that didn't end up getting called. You could argue that the Blues shouldn't have been on the penalty kill when the second goal occurred. But I thought that the Blues walked out of that first period, despite a very odd period. It was hard for either team, it felt like, to get momentum going. I thought they weathered that storm pretty well and put themselves in a position where we saw them kind of start picking things up at the end of that first period. They had created a couple of good shots, a couple of good ozone possessions. And I was optimistic, I should say, going into the second period because of how they handled that. You figure you can get that crowd to quiet down a little bit, get them 20 minutes of breather. Perhaps you can shift the momentum a little bit. I thought that St. Louis weathered that storm in the first period pretty well. Anyone get in on this?
I do think that's a good point. And stereotypically throughout the course of this playoffs and really since the Four Nations break, that's kind of been the Blues' bread and butter, is overcoming adversity. And, even obviously it's not great to go down 1-0 in the first 2 minutes of such a crucial game like this to kind of pull yourself ahead in game 5 when it's a swing game like that. But I didn't feel like the Blues were out of it at that point because we've seen this team band together when they're down 1 goal, when they're down 2 goals, even down 3 goals at time. Like, this team has shown us throughout this stretch of the last 2 or 3 months or so that it's able to score almost at will at the snap of the fingers. And they come in bunches when they do. Like, sometimes these guys just get fired up and put 3 in the back of the net in the next 3 minutes. And then, you've got a completely different hockey game. So it didn't feel like the Blues were out of it then. And to your point, after the first period, coming away 2-1 there with that deficit and all those things going on, the inconsistent momentum at the very least from those penalties being called, I think played a large role in that. Coming out of there 2-1 as the score line going into the second period, I'm like, okay, let's go out, win the second period, and then we'll have ourselves a hockey game. And that for me was where the biggest disappointment was, because that's where I get the dog walking term. That second period was just, some of the worst hockey I think that we've seen from the St. Louis Blues since the Four Nations break.
So let's go ahead and let's get into that second period then. Let's talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where everything seemed to flip. And I'll even give the Blues a little bit more credit. I thought that the start of the second period wasn't that terrible. The odd part was that Jimmy Snuggerud knots things up 6 minutes into the second period. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is exactly how, like I said a second ago, it felt like that's where the game was going. The Blues were able to shift that momentum a little bit. All of a sudden they've knotted things up. They've gotten the crowd out of a little bit. It's go time. Keep pressing. And it felt like from that point on, everything just flipped. Mark Scheifele hadn't been back out on the ice up to that point. You're thinking, okay, things are moving in the right direction. And they just completely everything turned on its head for St. Louis. They ended up with 3 shots in the second period. Winnipeg ends up 4-2 following 40 minutes of play, but it could have been far worse based off of the amount of ozone time that they had. They had some stellar opportunities. Binnington made a couple of solid saves. I'll start with you, Jacob. Your thoughts on the follow-up to the Snuggerud goal and what went wrong for the Blues following that sequence?
It just seemed like they kind of just went right back into to the rhythm they had, which was not the right one. They got that the tying goal, and you think, momentum switches in that moment, but really it just seemed like they just kind of sat back a little bit thinking, okay, now we can slow it down. We got the time. We got got the game tied up once again. But they just, kind of back to what I was talking about earlier too, was just, they didn't help themselves out at all. Like, obviously they weren't getting things going their way, but they weren't helping themselves either. They weren't making things go their way on the other side of it, which is kind of tough. Why, I kind of said before we got on was I was more disappointed, not at the Blues, just at how the game went. Kind of almost like the hockey guys just didn't want to help them out. But at the same time, they weren't helping themselves out either. They weren't taking the tough bounces and trying to switch it around. It almost seemed like they were just trying to get every single play to go because it was agreeing for them. It was working for them earlier on, but there's always seemed to be a stick in the way, or the puck would just bounce another way or off a stanchion or whatever it was. And that second period, I think, was a prime example of they're trying to play a style of hockey that may have worked before, but obviously it's kind of wore off. The Jets have picked up on it. And at the same time, too, they didn't get much luck going their way, and they sure as hell didn't create any of their own luck as well. Outside of the lone goal, which, again, that's a prime example of what you can do if you throw pucks on Hellebuck. That was kind of a soft goal he let in. I watched that back, and I'm thinking that is a goal that should be saved 10 out of 10 times. Stick out you're supposed to get your skate out to the post and cover that specific spot every single time without even a second thought. Yet it somehow sneaks past his toe in that spot. So,
and that almost seemed like a rallying point for Winnipeg, though. That almost seemed like one of those, you know what, this was such a soft goal. That is absolutely the last one we're going to let up.
Explain that.
And
Mike.
instead of the momentum swinging St. Louis's direction, saying we just tied the sucker up, it almost seemed like Winnipeg said, that ain't happening again.
I also think that kind of lined up with like them realizing that Scheifele's not coming back. Also kind of lit a fire under them. Like, okay, like one of our best players is out, but we still got this because like we came here as a team. Like, you know, obviously Scheifele going down is huge, and that's rough for any team to overcome, but this team will overcome it. So it almost felt like, like you were saying, Mike, those two things combined kind of lit a fire under the Winnipeg Jets team. And it showed up in the face-off dot. I think at one point they said in the first period, the Jets didn't have nearly as much success in the face-off dot as they did in the second period. And at that point they said they were like 11 for 17, which is just domination from the dot there. So, whatever it may be, it did feel like the contrast between the second period for the St. Louis Blues. And we keep talking about this, and you were talking about it, Jacob, the rough goal that Hellebuyck let in, right? Even going back to the last two games and how he, probably didn't have the highest level of confidence going into this game. 2 goals on 9 shots on goal through 2 periods. One tells me that the Blues aren't nearly getting enough offensive pressure, sustained offensive pressure, and just like we're talking about funneling pucks on net, like just throw him on goal and see what happens. Like if this dude is fighting everything, which he almost had 3 goals on him, if Sonny would have picked a corner and not thrown it at the middle of his paddle, which also we can talk a little bit about ESPN announcers because they made it sound like Hellebuyck made the greatest save of all time. He literally just closed his eyes and stuck his stick out there. Like it was not a reactive, like it was literally just
a good save. Don't get me wrong.
But I mean, it's a good save, but that's luck
save,
for sure.
Yeah,
it's a lucky save.
That is 100%. And
I think my point is, if you're funneling pucks on net at that point, your first point is 2 goals on 9 shots is not enough offensive pressure for the Blues, but it also tells me that Hellebuyck was struggling again. So if you're Jim Montgomery, if you're the St. Louis Blues, you're seeing that in the middle of the period, like all of that success you've had in a small sample size. Why would you not try to increase that volume, even if it's like it did feel like the Winnipeg Jets came out and said, hey, we're not going to let them like dump pucks in and win the board battle so easily every time. I think they had a strategy and a plan to kind of counteract that. And then once they did do that, the Blues just didn't have an answer for it. Like it didn't feel like they figured out how to pivot effectively. Like they just kept trying the same thing and the puck just kept going back the other way. And the next thing you know, you're playing defense again for another 20 minutes.
I think the problem too is that they just could not set up any kind of net front presence. And it also strings, part of it's obviously that offensive presence just offensive presence, I should say, inside of the zone. But when you're also just not flinging pucks on net at all, I mean, you look back at what happened, these past 2 games in St. Louis, those are 2 games where, they're not putting up 30, 40 shots, but they're putting up 25 quality looks on net. And how many goals were rebound goals or tip in goals or getting traffic in front of the net so he can't see the damn puck. Yet tonight it was, the shots that they did take were outside of the one Walker tip in and obviously the fantastic save that he made on Sundqvist. It was, okay, we're just going to throw it at you, stick out your pad, and you'll probably make a save. And that's kind of the gifts that they're granting him today. That's something that, it's always been my problem is that you got to recognize that, there's a getting pucks on net, but there's also just throwing them at the goaltender's chest over and over again. It's got to get to a point where you got to, obviously you want to see him shoot more, but at the same time, you got to start shooting quality. And they did it last 2 games. And then tonight it went right back to how it was the first 2 games where they're giving him softies right up the middle so that he can just catch against his chest and call it a day, get a whistle. And it just kind of all goes together. And it's just a constant cycle of morale lowering that does not boost anything on the ice whatsoever. And it fuels itself. Like, it's just a cycle of nothing's happening. and then it's just, oh, this sucks, we're going down. And then you kind of see that fuel just kind of, just get drawn out. And then all of a sudden, oh, now you're, it's a little bit slower in the back check, or you're not recognizing guys that well, or they're leaving people open. It's just kind of a whole cycle. And I think
is this a bit of a byproduct here of the lack of top end performers not performing? And I don't want to jump too much ahead of this here. So if you want to get into this here in a little bit, we can, but I've got
Mike, you brought up exactly what I was going to bring up. Through 2 periods of play tonight, the Shen, Kyrou, Neighbors line had no shots on goal. Now they were able to manufacture a little bit more Ozo time in the third period, but at that point they were chasing the game, it felt like, and even though it was only a 2-goal game, it felt like they weren't ever in it. Even though at that point it's amazing, you're thinking you're one goal away from being right back in it. And kudos to Connor Hellebuck, Connor Hellebuck, because in the first 2 periods we talked about some of the the weak goal that he gave up in the second period, but the Blues had some grade A chances in the third period, and he made some really good saves. So kudos to him, specifically for some of those saves in the third. But you bring up a great point that for the large majority of tonight's game, your top 6 was quiet. Shen ends up with 3 shots; those are all in the third. Thomas ends up with no shots tonight. Snuggerud, of course, had the goal, 2 shots. Kyrou, 1 shot. Neighbors, no shots. Bolduc's been quiet all series, no shots. And then Buchnevich with 1 shot. What does that say? Does that say more about the Blues tonight in their lack of ability to function or to manufacture opportunities, or is there a level of this that should be also credit to Winnipeg for how they stepped up in front of a goaltender that had been struggling and they could tell was still not on top of his game?
That's a good second point that you make here, because if you look at it here too, the Blues have done a really good job. I mean, outside of Kyle Connor and then Mark Scheifele, when he has been on the ice, that really all their top end performers have not been performing. And so both squads are doing a really good job of holding their top end performers. But outside of his 2 goals, get the milk cartons out for Jordan Kyrou, because we got, where are you? Where are you here at this point? Because I mean, this guy has been absolutely just invisible this entire series. I don't know if he's still hurt from that hit a couple of games ago, or if he's seeing ghosts still here at this point. I have no idea. Pavel Buchnevich, outside of his hat trick game, has had 0 goals. He really hasn't had very many good looks here at all. And his game is becoming more and more here of a playmaker than what he has been here as a goal scorer. And I'm telling you what, if he's going to be more of a playmaker here than a goal scorer, I have a bigger problem here with his contract. And that's a totally different point here, but that's a large red flag. Neighbors, Bolduc, Snuggerud, this is all their first game, or I'm sorry, their first playoff series here in the NHL. You kind of give it here from a little bit. I wanted to see Bolduc, get a little bit more offense, but he's been really quiet. Snuggerud, again, second game. Falk, he's being exposed here on multiple different plays, and the defense here in general is just it's really hurting them. They're really starting to show their age here at this point in this very, very heavy hitting series. Falk, Leddy, Suter, they're just not holding up well, and unfortunately, then that's half of your defense that just being left out to dry here sometimes, and the Jets are taking advantage of it big time.
Thomas, Jacob, thoughts?
It does feel like the narrative that Jordan Kyrou has kind of disappeared since that massive hit that was thrown on him is kind of adding up. But I also think to his point, he's never really been, obviously from a plus minus perspective, he's been night and day, made improvements in that respect this season, as well as the defensive side of the puck in terms of forechecking and back checking and all those things. I think Jim Montgomery has drilled home into him, if you're respective in your own zone, that can lead to, odd man rushes going the other way, and then you potentially getting more pucks in the back of the net. That being said, I don't know that the level of physicality that we've seen in this playoff series is strictly beneficial to him. And I think that him potentially seeing ghosts after getting absolutely drilled a couple games ago kind of lines up with that. So I think we can all agree that our leading goal scorer throughout the course of the season, like you would love for him to show up in the playoffs and, be more of a factor than he has been so far. But I think the Winnipeg Jets have done a great job of making sure that he's not. And there was a reason that they, throughout the course of the season had the best defense in the NHL. And it's not, I think when they have success and when they get wins, obviously it's lining up with them being on home ice, but it's also lining up with them stifling the Blues shots too. Like in the third period alone in their last 2 wins, I think they had a combined like less than 10 shots on goal. And it's just shutting the door. It's just locking the Blues offense down and keeping them from doing everything that they want to do. And the majority of doing everything that they want to do is within Jordan Kyrou's bag. So if they're just shutting all of that down, that also lines up with his lack of productivity in that regard too. So I don't know. I hate to knock the guy because this does feel like a WWE style, WrestleMania style series where we see guys like Braden Shen having an impact and knocking out Mark Scheifele. I don't think he meant to. I think he just meant to even the score because Kyrou got railed a couple games ago. I tweeted it at the time. I was like, that's a huge hit put on Jordan Kyrou. Scheifele and Connor should probably keep their heads on a swivel for the rest of the series because, guys are taking note of that, and we just saw it tonight. So
and he got ranked by Foxa later on. And I think I saw in the chat too, people saying that Monty was quoted saying that it was essentially the Foxa hit that knocked out Scheifele, not the Kyrou hit that did it. Because Kyrou, I think they said he skated 6 minutes after that hit, and then it was the Foxa one that knocked him out towards the end of that period. And that, it didn't look as hard, but when you're like a play like that, I think it's a little bit tougher on the body because when you get stopped like Foxa did to Scheifele trying to break in with no movement going the other way, that'll hurt you quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. That's going to be something interesting to keep an eye on. Obviously, whether they knew that Scheifele was going to miss the remainder of the game or not, Winnipeg most definitely was able to rally, and despite being without one of their best players, if not their best player. But that could be a different story potentially in a game 6. What I want to hear your guys' thoughts as to when you're playing on momentum like they were tonight in the middle of a game when you lose a guy. I think it's a very different story than when you have to all of a sudden potentially you're without him for a game or 2 games. How could the impact of Mark Scheifele and for all we know he's back on Friday, but let's speculate for a second here. What could that impact potentially be being without Mark Scheifele come game 6 if that's what it ends up being?
I think for me, I think it just kind of throws a wrench in what Winnipeg has right now. I don't think it's going to be, the biggest bump in the road. It's not going to be, they're running over a 6 foot, speed bump, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be easy when practically all season, even with the injuries. This past, this last bit, and even with you get Velarde right back in, and all of a sudden you say now arguably your best forward outside of Kyle Connor is now out, and not just the skill part of it, the leadership part of it, the team part of it, everything that comes with Mark Scheifele. It's going to be tough because you lose a lot on the team, and the simple thing is too, it can also, when you have to, mix up forward lines like that, when it's unprompted because of something like an injury, it can, it doesn't have the biggest effect, but it can have an effect. And it's possible that something like that could happen on Friday. Will it, be, just absolutely terrible for the Jets, something that'll completely ruin their day on Friday? I don't think so, but I don't think it, it makes it any easier. I think it certainly makes it tougher to try and go without Scheifele on Friday.
I want to go back to the lack of shots tonight from the Blues. We talked about some of your big name guys struggling to get pucks on the net tonight, something that was a real strength in games 3 and 4 for them. We have a couple of people commenting on that. Francis saying Blues never shoot, only pass. Problem is they can't pass. And then there's a fair point, is that the passing wasn't nearly as clean tonight as it was, I'd say, specifically in game 3, perhaps the latter half of game 4 as well. And then Doobie Doo, what a great username. I'll ask this, opening up to everyone here. Why were the Blues playing hot potato, all this passing and not shooting? I'm curious as to your guys' thoughts. The Blues found a formula that worked in game 3 and 4, and not to say that Winnipeg wasn't going to make adjustments, but they struggled so immensely to be able to do that tonight. What were your guys' thoughts on why they weren't able to put nearly as many pucks on the net tonight?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know. When you ask about why were the Blues playing hot potato, I think we're all asking that question too. And it sounds like Jim Montgomery was as well. I think he noted that it was the worst game that the Blues have played so far and the Jets' best. And I completely agree with that. But I think when the Blues struggle to get shots on goal, that is the issue, right? Is they have so many playmakers and so many kind of unselfish guys with a high hockey IQ that are constantly looking to create the best shot scenario possible, to create the highest danger percentage, of putting a puck on goal. The problem is, against Connor Hellebuck right now, until he stands on his head to completely will this Winnipeg Jets team to a victory, which even in tonight's game, I don't think he was capable of doing that. I don't think it's necessary. Like, just funnel pucks to the net like we talk about, and create chaos in front. And I think, to your point, Ethan, like, that has been the recipe for success for the Blues in the games that they've won so far. So for them to just uncharacteristically almost kind of stray from that and just start, firing pucks on net with less traffic, or not even fire pucks on net. And to your point too, Jacob, like, if they're struggling with the passing and if they're fumbling pucks and, everything's just a little bit off and everything's just a little bit sloppy, which it seemed like it was tonight. If you minimize the amount of passes it takes before you put the shot on goal, you're minimizing your chances for mistakes made before that shot happens. So that would have been, my focal point too. And I don't know if Jim Montgomery brought that up as well, but I'm sure they're going to look at that and make the adjustments for next game. That's what it's all about at this point. It's a best of 3 series. And the Winnipeg Jets won the first one. So still got 2 games. Blues got to take both of them. The thing with the Blues is they went on a 12-game win streak, which was a franchise high down the stretch. So there's no reason to believe that they're incapable of winning 2 games in a row. So let's see what happens. And like I said, I still think Jordan Binnington is that X factor in Game 7 that can – pretty much anything can happen with him in goal.
Just want to throw in really quick. This is a really interesting quote. This is from Murat 80s, the Winnipeg beat writer for The Athletic. Jamie Rutherford reposted it, and he said, following Monty saying that it was the Fox hit, not the Shen hit, and how he's kind of really on that fact. Scott Arnell said, I don't know how Monty got his medical degree trying to say how a player got hurt. He's way off base. So I think that's just a good little thing throwing the wrench at each other with the coaches now. So
very interesting. And that becomes probably the biggest headline of the remainder of the series, or at least for Game 6, is what is the status of Mark Scheifele and the impact that could potentially cause. That's going to be really interesting to keep an eye on here. Another quote from Jim Montgomery following tonight's game, courtesy of Jeremy Rutherford, Blues beat writer for The Athletic. They were better than us. We've got to be more connected. I didn't think our puck support was good enough. I didn't think we got back quick enough. I didn't think we won our forecheck. We didn't establish it. It's very facet. But you know what? It's a series. It's going to happen. Unfortunately, we're not happy about it, but we're on to the next one. It's as simple as that. We've got to forget about it. We're in a series. And that's, I think, the next point that I want to bring up. There's been a lot of frustration tonight in the chat. People saying the series is over. I don't know how they're going to win on the road. There's nothing to choke because the only chokers are the Jets for not sweeping us. I mean, there's been all kinds of different things in the chat tonight about the Blues being out of this series. And I think that this is where it's our job, guys, to try and slow the people down a little bit. I understand the frustration. Jim Montgomery said it himself. This was not the Blues' best game. In fact, it was nowhere near their best game. But in a series like this, I look back to, obviously this team is so much different than 2019. I'm so tired of the 2019 comparisons, but I'm going to do another one. Because something that we saw constantly in 2019 was that team. How many times did that team get beat by 4+ goals against Boston? And I can't even think of the amount of times that they got beat down probably at least a couple more times throughout previous series during that playoff run. And I'm sure there's other examples of this as well. It is you cannot allow for one game to control the narrative of what the series is going to be like. And I understand the frustration, but after one game, I don't understand why people are saying that this series is over based off of already the way that the Blues have responded with their backs against the wall during this series. Make sense to me, guys.
Yeah, they were down 2-0. I think that's the perfect example of it right there. Like and everybody was saying, Jets fans were doing it too on Twitter. Like, this series is over. Like, thanks for coming, all of that stuff. So and really, like, this sample size going back to the Four Nations. And I mean, we're talking about a team that clinched the playoffs on the last possible day of the season. And you're asking them to, with plenty of time and with plenty of, poise, just blow out a Winnipeg Jets team that has been the best team in the NHL, like, all season long. And, with authority, just win 4-2 and a 6-game series. Like, that's not the Blues team that I know. Like, it is nail biters through and through. When they won 2019, to your credit, Ethan, I think the biggest knock on them was that they couldn't win home games. They were road warriors and won all the road games, and somehow that still led them to a Stanley Cup. So if this season, in this playoff series, they're home warriors, and they throw in a couple road wins here and there, but really they're winning the majority of their games at home, and that still brings home a Stanley Cup, that's great. If it doesn't, I think Chat was talking about it earlier, like, there really is no choking for the St. Louis Blues, because by all accounts, the expectations were they weren't even going to be here. So I think that's something that we can hang our hat on too. But that being said, the series is not over. I still have faith in this team. Monty said it. Ethan just pulled it up on the tweet. Like, this is the worst game in their series so far, and they were still in it in the third period. The Winnipeg Jets were out of both games at Enterprise Center by like the end of the first. So it could be a lot worse for the St. Louis Blues in terms of what they can build off of and how they can move forward going to Game 6 and Game 7. But they're not far off from, swinging this thing in their favor, moving on to the next round and taking care of business and, strategizing for what happens then too. So,
Mike?
It's a 7-game series for a reason. And sorry for the switch here in the camera. My internet decided to go down with the storm here, I guess, that's going on. So
I hate to see it.
quickly pivot. So yeah, it's a 7-game series here for a reason, and I absolutely believe that the Blues will be able to come back out and they're going to put their best foot forward. Now, I don't know if that's going to equal a win here on Friday. I mean, I'm certainly hoping that's going to equal a win, but if the Blues have that mentality of the series is over, we're just going to go back to Enterprise and we know it's over. They absolutely could have done that, but they said no. Like, they're going to absolutely just keep fighting every single shift. And there is no denying that this was an absolute garbage effort here from them. They played a collective, I'll give them credit here, for 30 minutes. That's about it here at this point in time. But, I'm ready to put this game here behind me, and I'm ready to just move forward and say, you know what, let's go out there, just be able to play shift by shift. If Mark Scheifele is going to be in, he's in. If he's out, he's out. That's okay. You just got to be able to win the game. Just win the game, win each shift, win each puck battle, and just keep putting your best skate forward.
This is the Blues Hub Postgame Show. The Blues dropping Game 5 by a final score of 5-3. And just a quick reminder that the Blues Hub Postgame Show is sponsored by Hot Shots here on Sports Hub STL and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. And be sure to download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Use that code STL Sports as I look to put up there's the disclaimer. There we go, boys. Use the code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits, better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
We return on the Blues Hub Postgame Show as I get the disclaimer out of there. I get it up too late. I keep it on too long. Clearly, I'm out of it, just as the Blues were tonight as well. Ethan Hannaford, Jacob Stanoch, Thomas Welch, and Mike Meyer joining me for Blues Hub Postgame Show as we slowly begin to wrap things up. And just before we get to that point, I think we have to at least acknowledge and give credit to our boy Thomas Welch for the effort that he put in tonight, trying to match our guy Jim Montgomery. If you didn't notice during practice today, Monty had a Band-Aid on his face, and that was because he took a puck that hit off of the crossbar in practice this afternoon. Well, he had a Band-Aid on as a result. He was teaching the guys how to box out. Clearly it didn't work tonight, because that ended up being a big issue. But if you can see, let's see if we can get a side. I want to get a side by side here of that with
close enough.
Yeah, if you can see, I don't know if you guys can see, but Thomas has a Band-Aid. Oh, it looks a little bit more noticeable now. There, we'll put you in the solo mode. Yeah, he's
there. It is.
But you gotta take the hat off because the whole joke is involved now.
Okay, hold on.
There you go.
There it is.
There you go. Now
there
you look just like Monty. Oh, that's brilliant. So I commend you for the effort there. How hard did you have to try to find a Band-Aid?
It was pretty tough. I'm not going to lie. It took about like 15, 20 minutes to find a Band-Aid.
Oh, geez. Okay. So there's one more tweet that I wanted to bring up that I saw tonight. Luke Korak mentioned tonight, obviously, we got to give a little bit of love to Nathan Walker and the WTF line. They were +6 tonight. And to be quite frank, they were the only ones that felt like that kind of showed up tonight from a production standpoint. But let's be honest, guys, if it's the fourth line that is leading you in production, you're probably not going to win a lot of games.
No, unfortunately. As much as you love to see Walker and Torpo and Foxa get in on the scoring like Walker did tonight, you need those guys to be scoring your third, fourth goal after, Thomas risks one from the top of the circles or finding, Buchnevich side of the net, followed up by a Kyrou beauty goal off of a beautiful breakaway assist from Schenner. You just need to find the depth scoring, but you can't find it when it's the only scoring. And, you want to, obviously, yeah, you love to see the fourth line scoring goals, but if your first line isn't producing a thing, which is, that means that something's not matched up right. Something's not, even tonight you'd say, I don't even know if they even came close to producing outside of the secured goal. It was just getting it deep. Yeah. It seemed like the only line that really had any push to get to the puck was, I think I saw Neighbors push it a couple of times. The only one on that line, and then Bolduc, and of course these are individuals. But the entire fourth line gave it their all tonight. And they play like they do like typically in the regular season. Like they have a spot they're fighting for, and that's how they played again tonight. They always play like that. Even if they don't have a spot they have to fight for. I don't think they do, but they still play like it, and I love it.
So let's go ahead and let's get into what is the most at this point. We here at Sports Hub STL, we move the direction that the chat is moving. So we're going to move in that direction, and everything has been based around the physicality that St. Louis played with tonight. Anthony mentioning that he wasn't a fan of the hit on Scheifele, and I'm assuming he's a Jets. Well, perhaps he's not a Jets fan, but he says GG Blues, so that's where I got the assumption that he was mentioning. Hopefully Scheifele ends up being all right. You never want a player to be injured, that is for sure. But people start bringing up some points. Matthew saying the Dirty Blues back at it again. Sparky says tough on whistles. Was it Shen who left his feet and pounded 55? I say suspend 10, and the chat has just continued going on. Jay saying it was headhunting. Matthew, it's definitely a suspension worthy hit. They keep going on. Anthony doesn't think it was necessarily suspension worthy, but definitely should have been penalized. I'm gonna keep bringing up some of these comments because I think you guys are getting the picture, and I want to hear our thoughts. I think where the people are specifically talking right now about Braden Shen's hit on Mark Scheifele in the first period, but Shen had a couple of big hits tonight, and Foxa had a big one at one point on Scheifele as well. What are we thinking here? I'm going to try to take off my blue-colored lens glasses here and see this through a non-biased view. But I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on if this was dirty play from St. Louis at any points in this game tonight.
No.
If there's head hunting, then there should be groin hunting, because there were several sticks that were in some not so friendly areas here, boys.
Okay, I just want to start this off. Was the puck entirely in control / the area of Scheifele? You can argue that point. That's not what I'm arguing. The hit itself is not a dirty hit. It was an early hit. Shen left his feet after making contact, as every player does. You see that on simple checks along the boards. They leave their feet with the momentum making the contact. It always happens. People don't realize that. The feet constantly leave the ice. It's if the feet leave before contact is made. Contact was made while the feet, when Shen's feet slowly came off the ice. Did he hit him high in the chest? Yes, that's legal. He did not hit him high. He did not hit him in the face. He got him with his head down, not paying attention, coming along the boards like what happened to Kyrou. The only instance was Scheifele didn't have full control of the puck. Clean hit.
Any other
that's my take in this scenario is the Kyrou hit, right? I mean, Lowry just absolutely pulverizes the guy, and you don't hear a single Blues fan like crying, complaining. We're talking about it right now. Kyrou has not been the same player since he got clobbered by Lowry after that hit. But nobody here is saying suspend Lowry for a game so he has time to sit and think about what he's done. Nobody's doing that. Braden Shen's not the only Shen on the ice throwing around hits. Luke's doing it too. So, this is a playoff series in the NHL playoffs. And, for the St. Louis Blues, we haven't been here for a while. And for the Winnipeg Jets, they don't always have a lot of success in it. But that being said, it's a physical mayhem warfare out there. And if you're going to nitpick every single replay and tell these officials who, for both teams, have been inconsistent and, arguably bad on both sides of the puck for both teams throughout the course of this series, if you're going to tell them to go back, look at the replay and suspend this one instance of a player being too physical, I think that's ridiculous.
You wouldn't be able to field a single face-off. Everybody would be suspended at this point.
I mean, there's cross checks on every play. You're going to suspend all those guys too?
There's illegal plays every single play. Right. I don't think that's literally what people don't realize. There's cross checks. There's punches out there every single whistle. There's horse collar. Everything that goes against the book happens constantly. And I just want to bring up, obviously, I don't want to get too, super blue-sided, but I just want to talk about Logan Stanley for a bit and how he is
here we go.
Every single game. All he has done, especially in game 3 and 4, is run guys constantly. I mean, can we also talk about how Adam Lowry threw his glove into the stands and started punching people? Yet we have one borderline, still clean hit, and everyone's talking about suspensions all of a sudden. I just want to throw that out there. Just saying, Logan Stanley, yeah, thank you for the agreement. Yes, he is. All he's doing
For those
is
that are
looking
for those
for
that are
trouble, looking for hits, looking to injure. I don't care how many times he smiles in the penalty box. I would like to see him suspended because he's had exactly – I shouldn't even say exactly. He's had so much more plays that should have there have been instances where he probably should have had 5-minute majors. Lowry probably should have been gone in that game 4 of 5 after chucking a glove and going to town, but right in front of the Blues bench. So I think one hit should not be discussion for suspension when the Jets, for all 4 games, have been doing much worse things. Just saying.
And I think the point here from all of us is that the St. Louis Blues play a physical style of hockey all season long, and they're built for the playoffs because they have warriors that thrive in that physicality, right? So even though we're talking about instances where, Adam Lowry, Logan Stanley, like, I love all of that. Like, I like watching Lowry blow up Kyrou. Kyrou's on my team. He's my boy. I'm rooting for him every single time that he steps on the ice. From a hockey fan perspective, kind of sick just seeing him get hit by a train. Like obviously I don't want him to get hurt, but that's just exciting hockey at its finest, at the highest level in playoff time, right? That's like the shit that you dream about. So we're talking about nitpicking and pulling all this stuff out of here. I don't even want penalties for this stuff. Like, just put the whistles away, let them play 5-on-5 the whole game. Like, let them cross-check each other, let them throw each other into the boards. Like, obviously don't want anybody to get injured, and I think they've done a good job, like, pulling out the misconducts and, saying, hey, guys, just hit the showers and think about what you're doing.
Right, yeah.
Control the game, right? But don't affect the game. I don't want to have the refs' fingerprints all over this thing one way or another to be like, they're getting all the calls left and right, and, like, they were 75% on the power play, and the refs gave them 12 of them in the series. Like, all that stuff just drives me insane. I want to see the best teams play the best teams 5-on-5, duke it out, 7-game series. Whoever comes out at the end deserves to move on. And I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I don't think I could have said it better.
Well, that was pretty damn entertaining, if I say so myself. And it's funny. We appreciate the Jets fans that are in here as well. But here's what I will say. Both fan bases that are in here in this chat are saying the exact same thing. They're saying that the opponent's dirty. And guess what? And guess what? This is the physicality of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Yes, the Blues play a physical game, but the Blues did not play this level of a physical game during the regular season. But teams, and let me just say this too, and I think it was Maestro that said it, 425 hits combined in 5 games. Now, I know if that stat's confirmed or not, but I can tell you it's been a crazy amount of hits. It's been a ridiculous amount of hits, and I want to say that it was 167 to 165 going into tonight's game. That's what they said on the pregame show tonight. This has by far been the most physical series in the playoffs. This is playoff hockey. So, and you know what? There has been hits in multiple series that people have been arguing should be suspension worthy, and I don't think there's been a hit that's gotten a suspension yet. They were saying Tom Wilson should have been suspended. There were people saying Ovechkin should have been suspended for his hit. Matthew Tkachuk was. People were saying stuff about him, and guess what? There hasn't been a single one. You know why? Because this is the style of playoff hockey. And listen, can you make arguments for some of these? I don't know. Perhaps I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm the expert in comparing one hit to the other and saying, well, that was a little bit more weird than that one. But all I know is that once you do one, then you get into a tough spot because all of a sudden you have to do every single anything that's at that level. You have to. Then that guy's gone, and all of a sudden you're losing star players out of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And let me tell you this. The NHL doesn't want to do that with Alex Ovechkin. They don't want to do that with Braden Shen. They don't want to do that with Matthew Tkachuk. They want the stars to be playing in the games. I think Thomas, you said it very well, right? You want them to keep the game in check without affecting the game too much, referees. And I think there's been at times during this series, especially a little bit earlier on, that they were a little bit touchy. I would argue even tonight there were a couple of moments when it was a little bit, especially early on, it felt very touchy, and then they let it play and let them play. It just felt like they let them play at the worst time to where it became an inconvenience for the Blues. I thought the Blues got away with perhaps a couple here and there as well. That's just how the series is going to go. By the end of it, you hope that balances out. So that's the last thing that I'll say on that. Gentlemen, we are an hour into this, so we appreciate the chat. You guys have stayed active all night throughout. Here at Sports Hub STL, we want you guys to be just as much a part of these shows as we are, so we appreciate you guys sharing your thoughts, and then we have mentioned plenty of them tonight. We head now to a Game 6 that, as of now, I check my clock, it is 12:37 a.m., so it's Thursday morning now, which means that we continue to near now a Game 6 matchup in St. Louis on Friday night, 7 o'clock puck drop. Final thing before we wrap, I want one thing from each of you. What do the Blues need to do to get back into the series and make sure that it's going 7 back to Winnipeg? I'll start with you, Jacob.
Same thing I said for, Game 3 was set the tone early, and obviously, not in a physical way. Don't go and, beat a guy up, slash a guy across the ankles. Do exactly like they did in Game 3. Get the crowd going, get the atmosphere right, get something going. Even you don't have to score right away, but get some good offensive pressure. Show Hellebuck that, you're here to play. And, that's pretty much that's it. Just set the tone early, with other things than just trying to beat the hell out of the other team.
Thomas?
I think it's just, tap into what happened last time you were at home and ride that momentum high of the home game win streak, right? We know that Jim Montgomery has drilled into this team the importance of not only performing at home, getting into your routine, taking that step back, taking that load off of taking advantage of having the home ice in this game, but showing out for the fans, man. I think it's really just putting on a show and, drawing the emotion from an absolutely rabid fan base, which, to Winnipeg's credit too, you guys absolutely showed out again and have done so throughout this series.
Jeremy,
the whiteout is phenomenal.
I think it was Jeremy Rutherford tonight that said it was the loudest crowd that he has ever been a part of, and I'm sure that there were
no joke.
I'm sure there were plenty of different media personalities and people that were saying the exact same thing. So I didn't want to step on you there, but kudos to
No,
Winnipeg.
you're good. I mean, even on the broadcast, you can just tell it's night and day. Like peaking mics left and right, like it's just crazy stuff. So we in St. Louis, we see that, right? We see the Jordan chants as somehow they're trying to blame him for the team's woes when he's the only one that really looks like he's keeping us in the game. That's fine, but he's got nerves to steals for a reason. But we see that and we match that with Enterprise, and we know the heartland of hockey is going to show up and show out at Enterprise Center to back these boys who, like we said, many expected weren't even going to make it here. Many, some guys might have even put their hair on the line and had to shave their head for purposes unknown. That being said, I like this team's chances in Game 6. They blew them out in the last 2 games. I think it's going to be a blowout again. Move it to Game 7, and I like Jordan Binnington's game in Game 7 because we know that he's a big game goalie and he has a great record in do or die games. But you got to do the work to get there. You can't just bank on all that happening because fate said it was going to be so, and because it happened in 2019, so it has to happen again. Like, it will not happen with a performance like the Blues had tonight. So you got to shift, you got to adjust, you got to find out all of the things that you did incorrectly tonight, which was just about everything, and flip it on a 180 in your favor. And I think the Blues are going to, hopefully do that.
Mike?
I think you need to be able to set a tone that's going to continue to bleed over here into the eventual Game 7. And I think that starts here with the defense. We've said it over and over here again, defense wins championships. And I think here with this series in itself is you need to be able to make sure that your entire team that is on that ice is not concerned about going back here into their defensive zone. So I think if you tighten things up here defensively, it's going to end up bleeding over here into your offense, and it's going to make them feel a whole heck of a lot more comfortable if and when that the puck here goes beyond the blue line, goes back into their zone, and they say, okay, we're good. We can be able to tighten this here up. And so once you start building out here from the net here forward, I think good things are going to happen. And again, you're going to be able to replicate that here going back here into Winnipeg and just say, guys, just play the same game and just keep moving forward.
I wrap up with this comment from Charlie that says Friday will be so much fun. That is factual. And the last thing, you see it right there. Freaking nightmare, boys. John Gruden's supposed to be at the game on Friday, so that will be a treat, as will everything else, hopefully, with Game 6. It has been.
I also think, just to one more word in there, sorry, Ethan, but I also think, given the back and forth of this series, no matter what happens, like if Winnipeg somehow manages to clinch at Enterprise, or if they do win in Game 7, like by all regards, like banger of a playoff series from every facet. And to their credit, like tough for them to be the President's Trophy winner, have all that pressure on you, and really have a team come in like the St. Louis Blues that have been red hot.
Hey,
and probably the best team in the NHL.
We gotta save that talk for Game 6, my friend. Now
I'm just saying, like, if it does happen, and then like hat tip, like, great series,
absolutely,
like
no doubt about that. No doubt about that.
Respect to them, all of that stuff. But I'm still riding and dying with my boys in Game 6 and Game 7 for the reasons that I laid out in the rest of this podcast.
We appreciate all of you joining us for tonight's Blues Hub Postgame Show and being a part of it. Be sure to, if you only got bits and pieces of it, be sure to go check it out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts as well.
Leave a review.
Leave a review as well. Yes, we greatly appreciate you all tuning in tonight, and we will see you all on Friday night following Game 6. They are, I should say, Jacob Stanoch, Thomas Welch, Mike Meyer, and I am Ethan Hannaford. This has been Blues Hub Postgame Show, and we say so long from Sports Hub STL.
Go Blues.